Hello everyone, welcome in. This is the first class of Section 3, Basics of Design. This is titled Character Design Part 1, Body and Volume, and HAVTZA's Coloso class, Step-by-Step Guide to Indie Animation Production. So welcome in guys, sorry for the little bit of the delay. I am finishing my second job up tomorrow, and then I will have a lot more time to focus on this content as well as different types of content that I have planned. So it's been a little bit trying to wrap that up. But in any case, super exciting stuff to look forward to. And keep in mind, you can always stay up to date with the content that comes out of said pipeline just by subscribing to the channel or checking out the socials that I have, which I'll link around the screen later at the end of the video. As for the notes on this lecture, it was very much just about considerations when beginning to consider your character design. So a lot of it was just showing silhouettes and sort of applying the principles of design that we learned in our character designs. Most of the top considerations are going to be around animation, but also trying to consider a little bit more about our animations from a character design standpoint. So to start, character designers focus on consistency of design principles while maximizing aesthetics within animation scope. Keep in mind, animation scope does consider budget and some of the more fiscal values, but also that pertains to the animation style as well, what may or may not be aesthetically reasonable within the animation. Keep in mind, your character should ideally be just enough to convey the idea of the animation while upholding the ability to be animated appropriately. Like I said, we're trying to balance really the aesthetic appeal of it and the message that we're directing using animation. The three main considerations of character design within animation that HAVTZA really highlights is practicality, or how easy it is to efficiently draw it, which you can do by drawing simple and easy shapes and designing your characters around these. The physics of the character and how they move and animate, and the aesthetics and how the character conveys its meaning through the animation. Keep in mind the considerations can also act as a design process to slowly build characters best suited for animation. So you can start by using these considerations in order to build up your character from a design standpoint if you'd like to. Using base character archetypes can also help give immediate impressions to the audience. And with that, for children, the bigger head and smaller limb proportions are going to be more generic. For teens, it's common to use adult proportions that are slightly smaller and a little bit more awkward. And for adults, the ratios will be most balanced and has the most variation in proportions. So you can use these to help assign very, very simple and easy shapes to design your characters from. And then just some considerations moving ahead. Animations of characters with realistic proportions isn't too common, and that's just because it's a stylistic choice. Because animation is a visual medium, a lot of the personality and narrative structure shown within the animation is going to come from the stylistic changes made to it. Keep in mind, your volumes that you assign your characters are going to keep your characters consistent through the animation, and using curved lines over straight lines is going to help give a bigger impression of that volume as well. This sort of relates to using basic shapes. Those shapes are going to act as a backbone not only for the volume of the character, but also for helping keep you consistent and keeping their form the same throughout the animation frames. Keep in mind the overall distribution of the weight on the character should be convincing. We are animating within the considerations of real life physics, and because of that, this character should probably be one that's reasonably expected to be able to live and be self-sufficient on their own as a person. When designing, you want to pay attention to the connections of part groups, and that's just because you want to make sure that they're distinct, especially as you're playing and animating through their range of motion for each limb. You want to make sure those are defined, and you can make sure that the character can still look the most appealing using and understanding the range of motion for each limb. Keep in mind the range of motion when designing character volumes, as said, and when designing a character sheet, the character proportions and joint locations need to be set to be used as a guideline. This is just because we're going to be designing a character sheet after that, and the character sheet is going to be the basis for making sure your consistency of volumes and proportions are the same for your character, and they're maintaining the same aesthetic appeal that they have when they're designed from the sheet. So because of that, the proportions and the joint locations need to be locked down, as those have the most tendency to change and variation through animation if left unchecked. Good character sheets should show the neutral front, side, and a 3/4 view, with the 3/4 view being the most important for showing the character at the right angle, as well as possible back and action pose views. This will just help put an image in your mind when you're animating about what your character really is meant to look like, especially this 3/4 views, as most of the time we're not going to be animating from a front and side. They're going to be a little bit more dynamic posing that comes with any angle besides these. From that, body language and proportions will play a large part in how the character is understood, That's just a design consideration as mentioned above, and as an animator, range of movement is first and foremost above design aspects. Keep in mind, first and foremost, our medium is animation, which means things move. That range of motion has to be at least somewhat convincing for the character. If you're having trouble with understanding the range of movement, make sure you're understanding the joints in the center of the mass of the character, which will help show a little bit more about the balance, as well as the sort of flexibility and range of motion the character is even viable for. For human characters, that center of mass is normally going to be around the stomach, but can vary depending on the character's volumes. If you've got a really big, muscular, stereotypically muscular build of a character, they might have a higher center of mass because there's more mass at the top of their structure. And then characters can have two different types of ranges of movement depending on if they are balanced or unbalanced in the scene. Keep in mind it's much easier to stay leaning and running forwards when you're actually running versus if you're trying to walk and stay leaning forward that much without falling over. So keep in mind if a character is well over their center of mass for balancing, they're going to be in an unbalanced state, which should be considered contextually within the scene as a movement or intentional as them just literally losing their balance. So keep in mind these two ranges of motion and how you play with the character within the scene. And with that, you want to make sure your character's joints and how they rotate is also in a convincing manner. We're not trying to get into some crazy exorcist territory with our characters unless you're intentionally trying to do that, but also understanding the joints is going to better help sell the feel or keep your character within reasonable means. So as a quick summary, use volumetric shapes to best represent your character for animation when designing them. It'll make it easier for you to stay consistent, as well as help design your character in a simple and more forward manner. Given the volume of the character, understand their possible movement and mobility for animation, and then keep in mind both design and animation standpoints when designing your characters for animation because of the nature of the medium and how we're trying to represent it. And then as for the self-assigned homework, this is pretty much just what HAVTZA did for the majority of the lecture, but you want to sketch 1 to 2 character sheets with front, side, and 3/4 angle views, as well as 1 or 2 action poses, and you want to focus mainly on conveying volume and form for animation so you can omit a lot of the details just so long as you're really displaying the volume and the natural silhouette of the character. So that was section 3.1. Like I said, we're going to be getting into a little bit more about the aesthetic considerations when designing our animation. So we've got a little bit more to go as we slowly build into the animation process HAVTZA uses herself, but still very interesting and insightful stuff to keep in mind as we start defining our own animation pipelines. As always, you can keep on top of further uploads or any other content of mine with my socials, which I'll link around the screen here for you guys to check out. And as always, thank you guys so much for popping into this lecture review. I hope it helped you, and I hope to see you guys in the next one as well. With that, I hope you guys have a good day, and make sure to take it easy. Bye-bye now.